My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. I'm only here to even a score. Whoa. My mind is set, my grind is set, my heart on ice is cold. We down right now, but did it before. Whoa. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up. See from here we going up. Made the call, I shown up. Now the game is sewn up. Say my name is blown up. We up, 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 we up.
What up, Night Nation? It's your boy, Roger, and welcome to the Knighted Ones podcast, episode number 130. I can't believe we made it to 130. I can't believe you guys sat through hours and hours and hours and hours of us talking about UCF football, but you have. So here we are. We are the only podcast that features a former UCF national champion, a former UCF radio host, an ESPN analyst, and hoops player, an infamous rapper, our resident influencer and IG star shooting the breeze, talking UCF sports. Remember to like us and follow us on YouTube, IG, and check out the 70-plus teams and conferences on the College Huddle. That was a lot. And we're going to be talking about a lot today. So if you ever wanted to know anything about NIL, you've heard us complain about it, you've heard us prognosticate, we've got the show for you. We're going to be talking NIL with an insider, someone who knows it back and forth, who advises universities. We're going to be asking him the questions about where NIL is today, which is super exciting. We'll also have some other members of the show. Unfortunately, Trey's out with the kid. Ben is coaching. Josh is out in Chicago doing, making money or something like that. So, but we will have Alan. But first, before we bring Alan to the show, I want to bring someone to you. He is an expert. He's our expert who's going to talk about NIL tonight. So welcome to the stage. Without further ado, Tom, and is it Henske? Did I say it?
You got it. You got it.
All right. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro on your illustrious career. Tom is and I'm going to read partially some of this because otherwise I'll forget some of it. Tom Henske is a financial advisor, educator, and founder of Total Sense, focused on helping young adults and families prepare for money before it shows up, which is huge because, as we all know, financial education sucks in high schools. I was telling Tom about how I say things suck. That's something that truly does suck in high schools. We don't prepare our kids or our youth. There are credit unions that do it, etc., but we don't do enough of that. He is a professor at the illustrious University of Virginia, so our ACC brethren. He's an author of 3 books. It makes total sense. 12 Conversations to Change Your Child's Financial Future. The NIL Financial Playbook, A Student Athlete's Guide to Money. That is huge, and especially in this day and age. So you guide various athletic departments around the country, including Memphis University, which we know, and compete against Columbia University, University of Virginia, Sacred Heart University, and you had a TEDx. I mean, is there anything that you don't do? I mean, seriously, people know me, but I think they will know you much better than me going forward. So welcome to the show. Thank you for sharing your time. And is there anything you don't do?
Cook.
Really?
Yeah. Not so great a cook.
Okay. Do you have someone that cooks for you then?
Oh my gosh. My wife is a great cook. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were celebrating an anniversary recently, right?
That's right. We were in Italy celebrating. Yeah. It was great.
Wow. That makes up for the tan and my pale skin because it's been raining for 4 straight days here in northern Florida.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a tan or if it's high blood pressure. I'm not sure.
Could be both, especially if you're involved in the NIL game. One of your quotes, and I kind of stole this from you, says, "Money doesn't break people. Being unprepared for it does." And I think that's a huge theme at the university level and athletics level, at the coaching level, and for student athletes. So tell me a little bit about how that quote correlates to all three of those groups of people.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I've been in this athletic space for 3 years now. A guy by the name of Tony Bennett was coaching the basketball team at UVA at the time. I pretty much had said, I'll never do two things, which would be teach high school students or teach college students. I was a high school varsity soccer coach for a little bit, for about 10-ish years, in addition to building a wealth management firm in Manhattan. And I felt like I got it out of my system. That was enough. And then got that phone call from UVA Athletics, which was Tony Bennett, who is, as everyone knows, he's just the class as class gets. And his right hand was a guy named Rodney Weidman, and then Ed Scott. And all these people will come up later in the conversation today. But they really had a vision that was much bigger than basketball. And it was about people. And so I went down for the meeting and said, in the middle of the meeting, they said, "Sense you don't want to do this." And I said, "Probably not. It's not really my thing." And I said, "If it's not going to be epic, I'm out." And they laughed and said, "Well, what do you mean epic?" I said, it can't just be one or two classes. It's got to be mandatory class once a month, all 15 players, office hours like a professor, almost like I'm on the coaching staff, complete and total access. And you can imagine what that was met with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right, sure.
Exactly.
To Ed and Ronnie and Tony's credit, they said, they gave me a call a week later and said, "We want you." So it just led to really getting intimate in the space, really knowing the athletes. It's grown into other sports now too, besides basketball. And boy, have I gotten an education in this space over the last 3 years, man.
I would call it a continuing education, because it is ever evolving and has not settled even to this date. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. But first, let me go ahead and welcome to the show for this week, last but not least, but always last, or sometimes last, because Josh is always last, Alan Levin. Welcome to the show, Alan.
Hey guys, sorry I'm late. How's it going?
Well, we know that you were never a student athlete because you're late for the show. We would be running, we'd be running stadiums if we were you. So
I was not a student athlete. That's correct.
You had a valid excuse. So just catching up, we were getting an introduction to Tom here, and Tom is an expert in everything that is NIL because he's fortunately, involved in it. And one of the things that's important with all of this is for the student athletes is education, and also not just them, but their parents and their families, because as in the past, scholarships were a vehicle to an education and to a better life for families. Today, they're just fast forwarding in that to the NIL part of that bucket. Like before, it was professional sports. Having a college education had value. And then getting an opportunity to play at the greatest stages and monetize that structure has changed. Now we've got guys like Chambliss, who's trying to get his 16th year because he can make $1.5 million playing 1 year of college football, at some school somewhere. So that dynamic has changed. Even the last 3 or 4 years, we were talking a little bit before the show about how NIL went, it's still a free for all. We just had this clearinghouse. Now the schools have pushed back on this clearinghouse. We're already clawing back some of the regulations that was there. What's it like for a university athletic department and a student athlete? What's that experience like in trying to navigate, hey, what's real, what's not, what can you do, what can't you do? And what's that like on a day-to-day basis and on the recruiting process?
Well, the recruiting process is completely different because the athletes won't even step foot on grounds or your campus until they know what the range of the money's going to be.
Yeah.
So, it's amazing. And there have been times where athletes wind up at the university without having been at the university to see it. Like, that blows my mind. And part of it is because, look, I've got a daughter who's your son's age. He's a first year in college, or just finishing up first year. So she was talking about where she wants to live after college with the type of jobs that she might take. And she said, I feel like I shouldn't have to decide as a second year or sophomore in college where I'm going to live when I graduate, because that's how this works with the internships at these firms. And I said to her, I go, it doesn't really matter when you think about it, because you're going to be there for only 2 years before you kind of either really advance in that company, and they'll send you somewhere else at the places that she's looking, or you'll go into something else. And so it's funny, because as that came out of my mouth just tonight at dinner, I started to think to myself, that's exactly what's happening with the athletes.
Mm-hmm.
They are less interested in the culture, less interested in the university, less interested in a lot of things, and just more interested in what's the bottom line number that I'm going to get. And I think we could all sit here and hear that. Now, I can give you examples of coaches are doing things once they get there to counteract that, but I don't know. To me, that just seems like a little bit sad.
It 100% is, because they don't know how to deal with that, right? As a student athlete, that age, we're talking about 18-year-old kids. I remember what I was like as an 18-year-old kid, and we had a clear path. It was you work your butt off in high school to try to get a scholarship for D1, and then when you get your scholarship at D1, then you have to start over again and work your butt off to make it to maybe play your junior or senior year and be a featured starter. Right. And then by that point, you hope you're good enough to be able to further that career in professional sports. Meanwhile, you're getting an education. That's not the case anymore. Now, everything Scott Frost talked this week, or the last couple of weeks. He came back to the university. He was out of the university after his Nebraska experience, out of coaching for a while. He came back into it, and he was talking about how he's had to get used to the transactional nature of NIL, whether it be transfer portal or for high school students, because he wants to build with high school students. And unfortunately, with the transfer portal, as transient is what I'll use, that as the teams' rosters have been now, what do you see? The access for student athletes isn't there coming out of high school as much, right? They have to go somewhere else, and then they're moving up to a power school. What does that strategy look like to you to be successful at a school like UCF, who is doing the 22 million that's that you're allowed to do? Plus, we've got an NIL collective now that we're rebuilding, as I'll ask you about that too. After the AD pulled the rug out from under it a year ago, when everybody thought they were going away, right?
Right.
So that's another bone of contention here on this show. But what is that experience like for the student athlete as far as accessibility is concerned, coming out as a freshman? And what different strategies would you take if you're let's say a Penn State, who just got a $50 billion windfall from their investment, part of which is going to the NIL, a UCF or a UVA, because we're at that equivalent level revenue-wise, right? Or someone like Memphis, who you advise, and being able to compete at that level. What does that strategy look like differently? And can a Big 12 or an ACC school compete with a Big 10 or SEC school at this point?
There's a lot wrapped into what you just said there. I think, part of the issue is, if you're a big time program, why are you shopping in high schools for athletes, right? Because you could find athletes who are good, especially at the mid-major level, who have proven themselves, who will appreciate moving to the next level, who have already gotten the gist of what college is like. 'Cause first year is tough. You come in, you're used to living, in comfort, let's call it, maybe comfort means different things to different people, but you're in your house that you were born in, that you grew up in. That's probably, to me, something comfortable, because maybe you have a parent or two parents, and then you go to college, and man, now you got to go to be on your own and take care of your own meals and get your not be woken up in the morning to go to school, like all that stuff. It's like babysitting, right? If you're a coach bringing a high school kid in, because it's really hard. I don't care how good they are. It's hard to really compete with someone who's been at a college for 2 years, has the whole gist down, has been working out, is bigger, older, right? So like you were having 24, 25-year-old kids, or like young adults, not kids, right, on the team. And there's a big difference to 24 or 25-year-old playing against an 18 or a 19-year-old. Like, what are we talking about there? So
from a skill level perspective and a development perspective.
Yeah. And now you're starting to see this. The second part of this is the international part you were talking earlier, because I know you played some international basketball, right? So that's a big part of it, because you're now shopping for players that are played pro.
100%. You're starting to see them come into the system now. Baylor University, I think it was Baylor or TCU this year, had someone who played in the G League who came back in and started playing basketball for them.
Yeah, I mean, like, Ryan Odom from Virginia, he was masterful with that. Him and his assistant Griff were amazing. They wound up getting 3 international players, and they're all really good players. 2 of them started. One of them's going to start in the future. And that's where he went shopping, because there wasn't enough of a market, I'm sure, to compete just within the United States. It's interesting because I played soccer, which is a highly international type sport. But when I was playing, the coach's philosophy, a guy named Bruce Arena, his philosophy was do it with US players. Right now, that's totally different because there was no NIL at the time. It was a completely different world, but he was winning national championships with all US players in a sport that was dominated by internationals. Right. So a lot of it is going to be the coach, right? And the coaches, not even the athletic departments, the coaches of the individual teams.
So you talked a little bit about how coaches were trying to, once they get a kid on campus, how they were trying to approach things differently. So from your experience and seeing at UVA and other places, what can they do to make those, because realistically speaking, and thank goodness we're down to 1 transfer window now instead of 2, right? But what can coaches do? What can a Scott Frost do to make a difference, to make them more sticky, to not take that next bigger paycheck? Because we've experienced it here, right? So we've had Malachi Lawrence on one end, right? And then we've had Lee Hunter on the other. Don't blame Lee Hunter. He went and made $1.8 million at Texas Tech, right? Left here to go Texas Tech. And then we had Malachi Lawrence, who's the opposite end of the spectrum, who stuck around and, got drafted in, I think he was 23 or 25 in the first round of the NFL draft. So what can coaches do? Because they're going to have to compete and have those conversations at the end of every single year. Everybody's got a limited budget. What can they do to make a difference if they are a little bit short, or they're competing against an SEC team that may have, or Texas? If UCF goes up against Texas for a player that they're trying to keep, what can UCF do besides try to match their offer from a coaching perspective to try to keep that player?
Okay, so let me give you, it's interesting because we were just talking about Ryan Odom at UVA. So let me use, because that's front of mind because I just mentioned it. Let me give you a good example. So they had, I think it was either 7 or 9 potential returners. All of them are returning this year. All of them. Okay, now, you have to ask why. Is it money? I don't know. there was like, I don't know the numbers per se, but there was one player who his name's Sam Lewis, who was one of the starters, a great player. And like, by the way, an amazing human being. He was getting offers all over the place from, if you believe what they say in the media. And I actually, with this kid, believe it. And when all is said and done, the rumor is out there that he came back for less money. Okay, so what does that tell you? To me, first of all, that tells me that that kid is really grounded, right? Because if he's going for less money, he's got a plan, and a plan that's a long-term plan and not a short-term plan. So short-term is go to 4 schools in 4 years, right? Like it is what it is. But this is a kid who's got a plan that he wants to really accomplish big things. But here's what it also tells me. It tells me that he liked or loved his teammates, and he loved going to practice every day. And what he probably realized is that I could go to these other schools for a little bit more money, but I'm going to miss my friends, and I'm going to miss the joy of practicing every day. And there's, you guys, you're an athlete. You play better and you work harder when you're happier.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like, oh, the more miserable I am, the more sucky I feel, the harder I'm going to try. No, that's like not how life is. So they're like, and so how do they do that? Like, they hired Michael Crowder, this guy who's just in charge of culture. And he's in charge of doing a lot of things in the off season, paintball, bowling, all these things that they do. They make them get involved in the school. They, like, in the summer, they took them on a tour because it's Thomas Jefferson's University, right? We were joking before it started, like giving the kids all the history. These are the student athletes when I say the kids, right? So it's those coaches who do things like that are going to retain players, because it does 2 things. It makes the player want to stay there. And by the way, it makes the parents want their son or daughter to stay there. And at that age, parents can be very influential, especially mom.
Yeah. I mean, that's an old axiom from recruiting going back to the days, right? You're recruiting moms, you're not recruiting the student athletes, right? And it's interesting that you say that from a cultural perspective, because that was the big thing with, that Scott Frost said he was trying to build again. But I do think that there's some price elasticity of demand, to use a business term, right? So like when we're talking about a kid who, all right, I can make at a Big 12 school, I can make, I don't know, 800,000, but I can go to an SEC school and they'll pay me 1.8 million.
Much different. Yeah.
Right. So there's tiers that have developed, I think, within those groupings. And then there's GMs and what their strategy is. Basketball strategy is different than football strategy, right? Because basketball, you have 11 kids on your roster. You only need 3 or 4 really, really good players to have a big impact on your success, right? Whereas with football, you get 22 starters, and they've all got to be operating in concert to be able to make a difference. Now, not everybody's going to be involved in every play, but even if you are running a feint or, blocking, setting up a blocking scheme, those one-on-one matchups, you have to have more of those players. So how does a school, at NIL, and from an NIL perspective, do the schools that you work with or advise, do they go more for, hey, we need to spend a lot of money and concentrate a lot of money in certain positions? Or do they try to spread it out and say, hey, we're going to get a lower level of average athlete, right, based on their star rating or ranking or whatever, or their tape or their size or how far developed they are, right? Because that's the difference between a 5-star and a 3-star recruit. 5-star has the athletic prowess that a 3-star has yet to achieve, but they may be similarly talented, right? So how how does the school do that? What is there a difference between like Memphis and how UVA looks at things, and what do you think people should advocate for? What's the best mix there?
Well, I think you have to put in some measure of kind of in the taking players from the mid majors to get in there that you see as they were maybe undervalued, and that's why they wound up there. And so you have to be a really good talent evaluator. So the talent evaluators are going to be really valuable here, and you're going to see an actual kind of like a little money ball going on here too. So a lot of these schools, they're really understanding the analytics, because you could get more bang for your buck with a mid-major as opposed to like Duke swapping with Virginia, swapping with, I don't know, pick UConn, I don't know, whatever other school you want to talk about, right? So when you're trying to get a player from a big school who's already at a big school, you're paying top dollar. When you're going for a mid-major player, it's not to say you're not spending good money. That's not what I'm saying. But that person hasn't really proven themselves on the big stage yet. And so a good talent evaluator will get those people in the door. And then you can then culture it. And then you're going to have to pay more money if that player develops. But then there's a little bit of a home team discount if the culture is right. But like you said, it's not $1 million. That's not there's no home team discount to that. So guys like the example you gave to me earlier, a guy's earning 800, now is getting 1.8 as an offer. He's not staying for 800.
And I don't blame him. Like, let me say that. I don't blame him one bit, because that's life-changing money for people.
Right. And the reality is, though, if he's really worth that, unless they're just throwing ridiculous money at a player that they shouldn't, the current place might want to step up and pay that. Because the other part is, you have to remember that this complete influx of new players every year is disruptive from a coach, from understanding their defensive schemes and their offensive schemes. Like if you talk to Tony Bennett, I bet you he would say, look, my defense is really good, but it takes 2 years to really get under your belt. And so if I have a kid who comes in and has been with me for 2 years and now is ready to rock and he leaves, then that as they say in the South, that dog doesn't hunt, right?
That's, and that's kind of what Kentucky was doing for a long time, where they were rotating their 5-star players and we're going to out talent people, right? And so that's what a lot of people are looking to do. We turned over our entire roster last year in basketball. And we were a tournament team again this year, right? But that's really, really hard to do, whether it be football or basketball. You can't teach scheme that quickly. Players have to adjust to it. They have to get to a point where it becomes natural. And when you're thinking instinctively, or when a half step matters, whether a play is a success or a failure, you've got to get to the point to be able to get those mental reps in, to do it over and over and over again and really understand it. You can't do that from year to year. So we've had, you talk about mid-major players, both on the basketball team and the football team. And for basketball, we doubled our NIL budget this year because we finally started getting full share revenue from the Big 12, whereas before we were getting half share. So the guys, two of our leading guys came from Milwaukee last year for basketball, right? So we saw them, played them. We grabbed both of them. They led us, realistically, they were heart and soul and led us to that team. Then we had someone like Jordan Burks, who came through the P5 or Power 4 narrative, traditional basketball powers, etc. Right? He came to us, played last year. He was good, but then he became inconsistent towards the end. He waited until 24 hours before the NIL deadline to put your name in, put his name in, shopped himself. His agent, and we'll talk about agents here in a minute, shopped him. And it seems that he didn't get the value that he thought. He was getting offered less than what he was getting offered by UCF on the original offer. And now he's trying to come back. We don't have the money or the scholarship for him, right? So this is a high level caliber 4-star recruit out of high school, played at nothing but high level basketball teams, including us, and now is trying to come back. What role do these, if you're an athletics department, what role do these quote unquote agents, and they're unregulated as to how much they can charge, what role do they have? How do these agents, how do you control these agents or negotiate? Oh, look, balloons. Negotiate with these agents, and be successful at that. I mean, I think schools have got to get to a point at some point where those agents are going to be detrimental, where they say, we just won't deal with this person. Because let's be real, a lot of them are uncles, aunts, whatever, that have now said, hey, I'm going to charge you 15, 20% of whatever you make. And so it's in my financial benefit for you to go to try to get and shop yourself, then they lose. So how are schools dealing with those agents? Like, how do you deal with an auntie or an uncle or whatever that are trying to negotiate on the kids' behalf? And how do you budget for that?
Yeah, I don't get really involved with that in my space. So much so. It's interesting, though. It's a big conversation piece. If you talk to someone like Ed Scott at the University of Memphis, who's their athletic director, or Carla Williams, who's the athletic director at UVA, you're going to hear them constantly saying this phrase, conflict of interest, right? And the key is, how do you eliminate as much conflict of interest out of this? Because they are, at the end of the day, they're kids.
Yeah.
They're kids with not a lot of experience in life stuff, right? I guess a lot of experience in some life things, not a lot of life experience in other things. But the conflict of interest is all over the place. And because we're still in the wild, wild west, like you said, there's no uniformity or concrete rules, or rules that are not what I would call black and white, or more in the gray. And I think the athletic departments are really worried about it, because look, at the end of the day, they care about their kids. They're student athletes too. They do. So I think it's a problem. And agents are right front and center, with that. And you're hearing the amount of money that they're charging. And then, we talk about that all the time, because, I'm more in the classroom with the athletes. So we're having more conversations of what happens when your friends ask for money, or your family asks for money, right? And like, how do you say no, or how do you kind of limit it? Like, so those are the conversations. Part of an athletic department's new role is, how do you make these kids educated and street smart so they don't get taken advantage of? It's just like, what I talk about in my personal finance class, that we talk about paying yourself first, right? Like, there's a reason you pay yourself first, and that means just saving your money first before you go and spend it. Because if you spend first and then try to save what's left over, there's not a lot left to save. But if you start spending, then you start with the saving, then you're going to save a heck of a lot more. And I think to your question, which wasn't the exact answer you were looking for, but kind of really philosophically, you're trying to teach them to be aware ahead of time before they get too far down a road that is going to cost them money and not be in their best interest.
So can you talk about some success stories that you've seen and some failures that you've seen with kids that have earned their money, and then what they've done with it? What have you seen in the best case scenario and a worst case scenario? And obviously you don't have to say names, but what do you see happening there?
Yeah, what I'm seeing is, when they get in a room and you allow them the ability to talk about it and to learn, they're much less likely to make a lot of silly mistakes, right? I do hear a lot of stories that are like kids going to schools. I'll give you a perfect example. A wrestler at a really big time wrestling school gets a car. Okay. He's driving this car. It's an awesome car. It's free. Right. And if you're looking on the screen, you can see I'm doing my air quotes free, because is headed. So at the end of the year, okay, he gets a 1099 for the value of the car. He had no idea that he have to pay tax on the value of that car. So let's say the car was $100,000. He's going to pay tax, I don't know, 25 to 30 grand. With what money? With what cash? He doesn't have 30,000 of cash lying around. So then now the car is depreciated, right? So you're going to want to having to sell the car and you get whatever the residual value is. And then you pay the tax. I don't know. Is it worth? I'd rather just rent a car for a year, right? It's a lot cheaper to do that. So those are the stories that, like, that one's a little bit unique, but you get the point of what I'm trying to make. Then let's stick with the car scenario. We do a class on how to buy a car, right? With the athletes, we sit down, we say, look, this is, first of all, you talk about lost opportunity cost. Look, if you got a $50,000 car versus a $100,000 car, if you took that extra $50,000 and you invested it and it doubled every 10 years, that's going to be an asset worth X million at retirement, or let's say maybe close to $1 million. Okay? Or you can start to think about, do you need a new car? And then what type do you need? The best conversation I can remember having was I walk in the locker room, one of these locker rooms, and basketball player grabs me, goes, "Hey, coach, I got a story for you." I go, "Oh boy, here we go." Right. And I say, "Well," I go, "What about?" He goes, "I bought a car." And in my mind, I'm thinking, holy crap. I cannot.
He just bought a Hellcat.
He just like bought the Hit My Ride. Like, this is not going to have a good ending. He goes, "Let me tell you about what I did." So my dad knows someone who's a car dealer in the car sales. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, this is getting worse. Right. He goes, "No." He goes, "I went, I negotiated. Okay. I got 3 quotes on the car from different dealerships. I got my financing approved ahead of time and locked into the lowest interest rate that I could get. I bought a certified pre-owned because I know, coach, we talked about in class, it depreciates right when I drive it off the lot." He goes, "I had my insurance all set, deductibles ready to go, the whole thing. And at the end, I made him throw in the winter mats." And I couldn't stop laughing. That was so damn funny about the winter mats. But that was like success to me. The kid was buying a car, but he didn't need to have the new car. And he also realized that his value as a player is not determined by the type of car that he drives. And therein lies the difference between a success and a failure. You know, my vision is for all these athletes that athletic departments take some of this money and they make all the student athletes set up a Roth IRA to start for their retirement. Every single one. Your first $7,500 that you get of NIL money goes into a Roth.
Well, let's talk about that too, because they don't get paid their full. People look at these contracts and they're like, "Oh, he just made $1 million." No, he didn't make $1 million. There's certain benchmarks, and they get dispersed a certain amount each month to get to their NIL contract, right? So there's the pool that the school's paying, but then there's also the pool that is being aggregated from local businesses, right? So when we talk about local businesses, do you feel like local businesses will tap out eventually at major college programs to say, "I'm not, I'm seeing these rosters rotate every year. I'm not seeing the success that I want for the school. I'm investing a ton of money into these student athletes in your NIL program." When do they tap out? Do you think that that's going to happen? I mean, you've got the Texases of the world, but the average power school or some of these what is it now? G6 conferences that they call, like Memphis. Like, when do these guys start tapping out?
soon, very soon, for a couple reasons. Number one, everyone has a very short fuse. Okay, so yes, you have the Indiana football story where they went in. Mark Cuban probably was one of the big donors. They donate a ton of money, and boom, next thing you know, they win. That's great. But what happens? How many are there that didn't win? That spent right. And by the way, last I checked, there's only one national champion every year in every sport.
Right.
Okay. And no one cares about second place when it comes to like the donors, right?
Yeah.
Like I tell my kids all the time, I won 3 national championships in 4 years. Okay. I sometimes have a hard time remembering who was the team I played in the final. Okay,
Wow.
the ACC, because I played in the ACC. I definitely don't remember those teams that were in second when we won the ACC. So if I played in the game, okay, and I don't remember them, no one else remembers them either.
Yeah.
So if that's true, and I can't say it's true for everybody, but definitely it's true for me and a lot of my teammates, then these donors are going to tap out because they're going to say, what am I giving my money for that? And by the way, I don't know that you could really justify some of this money for their marketing purposes. And you probably are familiar with NIL Go and everything with that. So you're telling me that a player that's not even going to be there a year is worth $1 million of advertising revenue? Really?
Yeah.
For in a local, small play, so what do you do? This isn't like you're doing national TV commercials for McDonald's or Allstate. You're talking about little mom and pop bagel place. Okay, well, really? How much revenue are they deriving from a basketball player saying, oh, I eat my bagels here? Really?
Not much if they're even showing up for the commercial shoots for that.
Right. But that's the problem, because that's what NIL, that's what the lawsuit was about in California. It was about name, image, and likeness. It wasn't supposed to be about pay for play. And so now all of a sudden, now you're going to get really gray. And by the way, you're going to get into this whole thing with Title IX.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of these universities, 75% of the budget, the revenue share, is going to football.
It also makes the money that carries the rest of the programs. That's the challenge with it, right?
Right. No, I totally understand that. But don't you think there might be a lawsuit on the women's side?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, right. So there's going to be that. And then if, let's say, a basketball team at that same school gets men's basketball gets 15%, wow, you're looking at 90% are going to men's teams. Oh, boy. That's the court of public opinion. That is not going to fly.
Well, what's interesting is
so you have to start to say to yourself, you asked me, are they going to tap out? Not only I think are they going to tap out because they're not winning, but they're going to tap out because they're going to say, how do you justify that from a marketing standpoint? Would you spend $1 million on a campaign like that? You never would.
No. Not unless you wanted to write it off as a loss.
Right. Yeah. Right. But they have to, there's the burden of proof. Right. And then you have to ask yourself, well, are some universities saying, we're not going to go through NIL Go, right? Or there's so much wild west going on right now that when this does shake out, and I do believe there'll be structure at some point. I think what's going to happen, they're probably also going to need to figure out, can we do salary caps?
Well, I've always thought that collective bargaining was going to be the way to go for all of this stuff. But in order to do that, you have to accept the entire Division I structure as it is. And I don't think I don't think the teams will do that. I don't think the Power Four conferences. And who knows? I mean, I have some real concerns about the ACC after the 2030s on who's left, right?
Right.
UNC was very vocal about things. UVA was looking, FSU was looking, Clemson was looking. You know, FSU made a stink, and that really was about uneven revenue sharing more than it was about them exiting. They knew the grant of rights was not going to happen. But I don't think the ACC looks like what it looks like today once that next TV contract goes out. So, to your point about schools that aren't making good choices or aren't seeing results, FSU is a perfect example of that. They had 0 NFL draft picks and spent on NIL more, almost as much as Miami did on NIL, and they're not seeing any results. FSU doesn't have a ton of money, and they're not competing within the state of Florida. What it is allowing schools like the Big Ten to do, schools in the Big Ten is to come down to Florida and compete because they have the dollar bills that they can outspend. So those local loyalties that we were talking about, hey, the state of Florida football players, they go to local schools, the UF powerhouses of, the Spurrier ages or the Miami national championship teams, the FSU Charlie Ward era national championship teams. Those players are going away, and now some of those schools lose that advantage that they had of being in a fertile state like the state of Florida. So how long can FSU boosters, or will FSU boosters at a fellow ACC school that has financial problems, how long are they going to keep these folks afloat? I don't think it's going to be for a very long time, and I think it forces the ACC to implode at some point in the near future. That's me prognosticating on seeing what I'm seeing, because I don't think they can afford to keep it where it is today. As far as if you were to outline a strategy for like a Big 12 level school versus an SEC level school, and we look at it as just a financial picture, right? You're a financial guy. You think in terms of investment and all of that. What would your strategy be in your NIL program beyond the 22 million that everybody can do, right? What's your strategy on how you invest and how you compete?
Yeah, that's really above my pay grade for what I do, because my job is more when the money shows up, making sure that the athletes do the right thing with it. So, by the time I enter the room, the money's either there or it's not, right? So that's a hard one for me to answer, because and quite frankly, I don't know that anyone knows. It's just a guess at this point. It's really just and I listen to a lot of podcasts on NIL. I do a lot of reading on it because I feel like I need to, when I'm dealing with the athletes, to be knowledgeable about it. But I don't know. I don't think that anyone really, because I don't know if people know where the tea leaves are going to be.
Yeah. Can you give me an idea? You deal with these student athletes at these different schools, during the season. You develop a relationship with them, you know them, right? And then you get towards the end of the season, and now everybody knows that, there's this looming deadline coming up with the portal or not the portal or whatever. Have you experienced or seen, and you don't have to get any specifics, how rampant is the tampering that's going on right now? And do the student athletes tell you?
No, they definitely don't tell me.
Okay.
100% don't. They know better than to tell me. Yeah, they know better. Yeah. They'll say things like, I don't know if I'm going to be here next year, or, I'm hearing I could make more money at other places, but it's almost like I don't even want to know. What's happening too with me is that I'm a little tapped out with my time in terms of, what's happening is at the places that I do work at, like Memphis, I was at the other day. That's why you mentioned that, right? So I'll go in and I'll teach a class on some money topic.
Right.
And the idea is that we're just trying to create some curiosity with the student athletes about money related items. You'd be amazed, like how much things cost, right? The kids have no idea how much things cost. And especially big time athletes, because they don't spend money.
Yeah.
Their is paid for, their food is paid for, their tuition is paid for. But like, it's important to start to educate them now on how much things cost so that they're not having shock, because by the way, this ends for most of them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now basketball players, they're doing this thing like, okay, if I don't make the NBA, I'm going to go play overseas. Okay. Or the G League. I get it. Maybe less of that with football, right? Because,
Well, you get CFL or whatever, but relatively speaking, what you're getting paid to play there, even compared to college sports, you're getting paid more to play in college than you would in the CFL or UFL or anything like that.
Right. So I think that that's kind of like the importance of what I do is, and a lot of them I do build relationships with, because look, when the most private things to people are their health, their wealth, and their kids, right? So, and when it comes to money, it's not like how many people have you told how much you earn in the course of a year, right? Like my athletes, they usually tell me, right? It's the university doesn't even tell me what they're getting paid. They let the athletes tell me, and they tell me. And so that becomes, you have a very intimate relationship with them.
Do you do any education of the parents along with that? Because I would think with as much influence as they have, simple things like how much does a parent, in your experience, budgeting, simple things like budgeting, are these student athletes' parents, are they financially savvy enough to understand that to be even able to pass that along to their kids?
No. And in fact, it's funny because I'm teaching the student athletes, and what I'm hearing is the student athletes are going home and teaching their parents, which is mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
Right. So, and it's actually interesting because what I'll find sometimes is an athlete wants to have a meeting with me and says, is it okay if mom and dad come? And it's interesting because mom and dad want to come because they have questions on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, great. We'll be in front of this professor of personal finance. He'll be able to give us some great information. So we'll just tag along with our football playing son, and we'll ask him the questions that we wanted to get answered. The coaches want to be in the classes, the assistant coaches, because they want to learn. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the family dynamic, though, what you said is very interesting. Some of these players are sending money home to mom and dad to live.
How much, if you like, I'm thinking about the value of this program, like these types of programs, right? If you invest in that and they're getting better outcomes with the money that they are earning, then they're not constantly trying to chase the next bigger deal, right? So do you think, how much value is there and how much focus should there be for universities on this kind of education with regard to retention? Because if you're giving them that and they're able to turn that and see real results in money, and they're not spending everything, so now they've got to chase the next paycheck, does that have an effect on retention in your opinion? And should all universities be doing that?
Okay. Yes, for sure. Not only retention, how about recruiting? Right. And so think about it like this. You're a college coach sitting at a table, right? The proverbial kitchen table conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden you're saying, right. So when you're like you're talking about football, when your son comes to play for us, we care about him beyond the field. In fact, we have someone who is basically their sole job is to make sure that the kids don't mess it up with the money, and they teach them about money. And the parents will say, either out loud or under their breath, where the heck was that when we were growing up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And these are not just the people who are like poor or like people who are struggling with money. These are like middle class to upper middle class America who they see the value. So this is where that comes in. If you're mama bear, okay, and your son is out of school and they are surrounding your son with resources and love and help off the field, mama bear is going to weigh in because son is happy. He's making money. Okay. He's being taken care of. Then what happens when he leaves? And so what happens is that the retention goes, like, it definitely is helped because it's just, I'll give you a perfect example. There's a softball coach, UVA softball coach, Joe Harden. She's amazing. She's got a program that she calls 4 for 40. You give me 4 years, I'll prepare you for the next 40. Okay. And she does all the things that she does are surround her women's softball players with all of these life skills type classes. You're a mom or dad sitting at that recruiting table for that. Now that's more of I take the kids out of high school. You're like that. You've caught my ear with that because there's not going to be like a softball coach that has a personal finance teacher on her staff. And so you've got two things that helps with recruiting, but it also helps with retention because at the end of the day, people are getting smarter. And that's why the kids are staying in college longer because they're realizing, especially the money winners, I can, like you said, I can make more money in college than I can playing after college.
Trinidad Checklist.
Yeah. And now people are realizing that, the pros is not a God-given right. It's a very, very, very small number.
0.5%.
Right. So you better get yourself prepared with that money that you're earning. For a lot of these basketball, football players, they'll never see money like that again.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
And a lot of these schools, the starting salary for just a regular student, like let's just say not an athlete, you go like you're making maybe $70,000 in your first job. So you went from earning 500,000, $1 million to earning 70,000. Wow. I hope you took some of that money and you banked it.
Do they grasp that? Honestly?
Oh, yeah, they do. They totally do. And you know what the best thing to teach a kid to learn to understand that is compounding interest. Isn't that funny? Because you could say, look, if you put away $200,000, that money's going to double at 7% every 10 years. So 200 goes to 400, 800,000, 1.6, 3.2, 6.4 million bucks. So by the time you get to be age 65, it's going to be 6.4 million bucks if you just put away $200,000 today of this money, which is a lot, I get it, and you don't touch it. You want to teach a kid to like make smart decisions? Teach them that because they get it. Not all of them, but I'm going to tell you a lot, and I'm going to say the majority. And also it becomes a culture when the guy next to you is doing it, you do it.
That's true. Average rate of return would be a great statistic to be using at negotiating tables when you sit down there at, with an NIL thing. So if you could come to them and say, hey, my average rate of return, if you follow our program, this is your average rate of return. So you come to us, we'll give you this NIL money, and your average rate of return, if you follow our program, is this. I think that would be a great recruiting tool, but that's just me for a high school or an NIL tool.
Well, think about it. There's a lacrosse coach, okay, a lacrosse coach that goes and he tells them, if your son comes and plays here, he's going to put away I know this doesn't seem like a big number to like after you're talking about basketball, $7,000 a year into a Roth. He's going to do that for 4 years, and there's going to be $28,000 in there. Do you know that the math is such that if you take that 28,000 and just leave it in there and you get 10%, that's worth $1 million by the time they hit age 62? $1 million for putting in 7,000 a year for 4 years.
Yep.
Okay. You like $1 million seems like a big number to like Olympic sport athlete that's not getting paid tremendous bucks.
People don't realize that they also aren't getting paid when they go for USA Olympics. They don't get paid for that either. They just get their whatever endorsement deals comes after their time with USA Olympics. So people don't realize that they don't get paid, or they get paid marginally if they win anyway, right? But they're in the poorhouse, proverbial poorhouse, because we have amateur sports, and that doesn't change for Olympic athletes either. We just saw, I can't remember who it was. It was a big school just shut down their swimming program.
A lot. Tennis is going in a couple places. Golf programs are going. Yeah.
And we have great Olympic sports at UCF. We just got to catch up with football again to get back where we were before, now that we're in a P4 conference. We've covered a lot. We're right at an hour. What advice would you give to parents of student athletes, and just parents in general, that are going through this time in their lives with their kids? What advice would you give based on your experience?
It's interesting. So you mentioned in the opening that I did a TED Talk, and I did a recent TED Talk. It definitely had an NIL angle to it, but the main part of it was what's called sudden wealth syndrome. And so most people haven't heard of sudden wealth syndrome, but when people think about it, they think of the lottery winner who wins all the money and blows the money, which we can have a conversation of if that's true story or urban legend, whatever. Okay. It's true that a lot of people, not only in sports, but in life, are suffering from what's called sudden wealth syndrome. And what that simply is money shows up and you're not prepared for it. And therefore you make bad decisions because you do, instead of the proverbial ready, aim, fire, you do the ready, fire, aim, right? Or you just skip fire.
Skip.
Go right to fire. Go right to fire, right? Skip, ready, and aim. So like, I think that if you're a parent listening to this, and whether you're a parent of an athlete or a parent of a, 16 to 25-year-old, you gotta have the money conversations, and you'll see this all when the TED Talk gets released, and do the little things to make sure that they master the pause. In life, we've learned that mastering the pause is one of the best skills you can have. You really avoid so much trouble when you just pause. And so what I'm telling parents is to teach your kids to pause, and then to kind of figure out what their purpose is going to be, and then figure out who the people are that should surround them, and then figure out what their plan is going to be. So the 4 Ps, right?
Yeah.
And so the 4 Ps, that's, as a parent, if you teach your kids just that, just those things alone, your kid is in a ridiculously better place for it.
That's amazing advice. And I will tell you that most of us forget the pause part of it in a lot of different decisions. There's various influences for a lot of those things. We forget the pause. That's great advice. And I guess I was going to say, when the TED Talk's ready, we can drop it into the comments. I'll repost this as an actual video all on its own as well, not just the live session. But when you have that, if you'll send it to me, I'll make sure I put this in the comments for anybody that's watching this later. What do you see? I'm going to ask this last question, and then I'm going to get to all the great things that you're doing and let you brag on yourself a little bit here, because there's a lot to brag about. And I've had a great conversation with you before we even started the show. What do you see in the future for NIL and student athletes for the next 5 years? What do you see happening?
Structure. I think you're going to see structure. You're going to, obviously you started to see the last couple of weeks, this transfer portal, there's got to be some limits to it, right? We can't have 70-year-old kids playing basketball, right? It's like, is there next thing you know, we're going to see it's going to be like an AARP, right?
The old rec league.
I'm getting paid this for NIL and I'm getting my social security checks, right?
Yeah,
So we got to stop that. We got to have some sort of 5-year-ish and be done, right? And then what that hopefully does is stifles the going from college to college, right? And then you maybe the good old days, remember you'd have to sit out a year, right?
Yeah.
So I think you put those two things in, a lot of this stops. Then the money gets to realistic numbers because there's not going to be as big as this annual bidding war for every player. Every player is on a 1-year contract.
You look at some of these power programs and even the bigger conferences in Big Ten and the SEC, they can't compete. They've been outspoken about this as well. So there has to be some sort of limit that gets introduced. Alabama, believe it or not, is not competing with Penn State as far as what their budget is. So, teams like that, Kirby Smart was talking about this recently on how a lot of the SEC teams lost their dominance over others because they can't outspend. It's kind of evened out at the top level. It's kind of evened out what schools can get what players and who can aggregate talent. And so it's interesting to see, I think, the most influential conferences who have the most voting rights will end up having to regulate it just simply because they can't afford to compete even within their conferences anymore. And I think that's what you're starting to see. So the coaching staffs are gonna start doing this. I think the programs themselves are going to start doing this. And to your point that you said earlier, once you start losing Olympic sports and you start getting into Title IX problems, the court system will get involved because they will have to in order to keep the sport alive. So it's really interesting take from that perspective. I appreciate that you and I will talk more offline and keep in touch. And what I'd really love for you to do is obviously share your podcast. I did pull this up, Total Sense. You do have your own podcast here, the Total Sense podcast. And you said you got called Sense earlier. So is that a nickname that you've been given? Is Sense?
No, it's funny because when I first started in this endeavor, and we were trying to think of a catchy name, we wanted it to be Total Sense, SENSE, right? But it was taken by too many things, and it just was going to be a pain in the neck. And somebody said, I actually think it was the head of the director for the library in my town said, you should call it Total Sense, CENTS. Here's what I didn't realize. Do you know how much in your daily life you use the phrase total sense?
Yeah.
Okay, it's hysterical. We don't realize how we've been conditioned to say, oh yeah, total sense. That makes total sense. Da, 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 da. And so I don't know, I must be a marketing genius or the luckiest dude in the world to have picked that. Yeah, right. It was probably the latter, right? Lucky. So I think that's where the name came from. Believe it or not, it had a local flair to it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, and this part of it with athletes is Total Sense University, or Total Sense U, as we like to call it. And what I've done is I put resources for free on that website for student athletes who have asked me questions of either a topic or how do I. And every time they ask me a how do I create a blog post or a resource for it. And so that's there for athletes to just go on and take. And I hope, there's budgeting sheets. There's how do I buy a car? How do I get an apartment? How do I choose a financial advisor? All that kind of stuff. And then now it got so big that I had to put this in video format. So think about Khan Academy meets Coursera type thing. And I have 20 classes in a video classes. Each is 20 to 25 minutes called Athletes Edge. And Athletes Edge, universities are using it now to kind of like do self-study. And it's got also, you'll love this, right? It's right up your alley with the AI. It's got an AI component like an Ask the Expert that's curated just for approved financial information. And so what's happening is that the universities are white labeling this because they're saying, this is going to be what our graduates are using to ask financial questions. Our name is on it. We could push information to them. This is going to keep them closer connected to the university and get more donations. They're no dumb.
Please tell me you're monetizing that. I'm just saying.
Yeah. I am, but all the money from this goes right back into the mission. I had a wealth management firm that I sold. So I'm good in terms of where I am. So this is kind of my Jerry Maguire moment that I'm doing. So I actually think that this is going to be, the universities will license it and I'll be able to take all this money and put it back into financial literacy efforts. I'm super excited about it because I feel like that's a way to really grow something is you build a business that throws off cash flow that can help, advance the mission. I mean, that's really, as it pertains to giving back, that's my give back.
That's awesome. Well, what other ways can people find you if they want to follow along and get all this amazing advice? Because you do provide a lot of value, not just to student athletes, but to people in general. As we talked about earlier, financial literacy is at an all-time low for everyone. So how can they find you in all the places?
Yeah, I think, my newsletter, I think, is great for parents. So if you're a parent of, like I said, a 6 to a 26-year-old, you should be reading my newsletter every month because it gives great tips of conversations you can have right at the dinner table or on the car ride where, you actually have your kid as a captive audience. So that's really cool. I think, the podcast, but I think what you're really going to start seeing me now is more in the university athletic space where people are having me in to work with their universities and guide them on what they should be doing, who they should be hiring for this financial literacy effort, using how do we use video? How do we inspire good habits, that sort of stuff. So I think that's really where most student athletes are going to find me when their universities call, and most athletic directors. My phone, I'm starting to get like tons of calls saying, hey, we heard you're the guy. They said, ironically, we heard you don't give a crap about money, which is so funny because you're the personal finance guy. You think you would care about money. We're here and you just want to kind of really advance this cause. And it's amazing when you're like that. You'd be amazed some of the places I'm sitting down at and people I'm talking to.
Well, there's certainly some people we know in the admin at UCF side that we can make some introductions for you if you haven't made them yet. So
yeah, that's great. That's what's happening. Like people are hearing about it and they're like, why is my university not doing that? Like we better get on it because it's going to be the thing where people, if you don't have it, it's kind of like when, like at some point, if you didn't have a website, you didn't exist. Remember those days, right? Yeah. And like, oh, you don't have a website? You must be a loser. Right? You must not like be real. You must be fake. I think what's going to happen is if there are certain things, especially on the financial literacy side, if you don't have that as an athletic department, people are going to look at you like, what? You don't care about your athletes? You don't have this buttoned up? Oh, you only care about wins and losses. And I don't really believe that to be true. I believe that everyone's just stretched thin, but someone's going to say it.
And there's a lot of moving parts. All right, Tom, it was such a pleasure to get to meet you. I'm sure you and I will definitely talk after the fact. We'll see if we can make some connections. Thank you for sharing your views on NIL. It's such a nebulous topic that consumes so much of college athletics, and it's certainly changed the space and certainly for young people. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Anything else you want to say before we let you go?
No, I really appreciate what you guys do and love listening. Even though I didn't have any real big connection to UCF, I still enjoy smart people who care and good entertainment. And so thanks for having me on. It was great. It was like an honor to be on today. So I appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. And I'm glad you think we're smart because not everybody does. So we appreciate that, but we'll keep in touch and for sure, we're going to keep talking about money here shortly. So thanks, Tom. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for joining us. Go Knights. And then, all right. So for Virginia, it's I'm losing it now.
Who's or Cavaliers?
Who's? That's what I was going for.
Yeah,
Who's.
we go. Yeah, the Go Who's. Yeah.
I know. I remember because it's different than what you would expect it to be for Virginia. So, but I go Who's, go Knights, go Who's, and charge on. Thanks, man.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Guys, take care.
All right, Alan, we've got more money to talk about, dude.
More money to talk about?
We got more money, more problems. We have the NIL, or not the NIL, the budget numbers that have come out for UCF. And we kind of want to talk about that because we've been talking about it for the past 3 or 4 weeks. $108 million was the budget that we came through fiscal budget. It wasn't that long ago that we were at $68 million. Now that money is reflected in all the donations, anything that we got for funding, all the revenue that we brought in, any kind of revenue that came in, we brought in $108 million worth of revenue. Now, if you were watching this recently, the Cows have been spouting off saying that they had $122 million in revenue last year. So number one, Cows fans, since you're not as hip to the what you're actually looking at. Number one, that includes the bond revenue that you guys got for your new facilities and the loan money that you have borrowed so far to build your facilities. So no, USF did not earn, or the Cows did not earn $122 million in revenue. They borrowed a big portion of that, right? So even, and this was last year's numbers, remember, which takes us to through academic year. Through this last July, we started our new academic year, which now we are at the full share. So this doesn't reflect full shares. This is half shares, which means that next year we will have an additional $18 million or so plus to add to that total. So we will go from 108 million to about, I'm projecting about 130 million for the university next year. Now, at 130 million, that puts us around the top quartile as far as budgets within the Big 12. So BYU is blowing everybody out of the water. Texas Tech obviously spending a lot of money as well, but it puts us in the top fourth of the league as far as revenue projected. Now, in years past, every single conference we've been in the top 1 or 2 on revenue numbers eventually. We didn't start that way, but we get to that, right? At the top quartile, there's no reason we should not compete at a higher level for conference championships in the revenue producing sports than we have in years past. So let's talk about, do those numbers surprise you at all, Alan? And how does that make you feel knowing where we were when we were going to school and, you're looking at $68 million?
Well, so explain it to me, because I still don't quite understand all of the revenue and how we get money from certain sources and how it's all broken up. So you're saying revenue, meaning that's what we're projected to bring in, like through sales and all that, or you're saying that's what our budget is? I guess I'm not quite understanding.
That's the revenue we brought in for last academic year. So through
academics, through athletics, sorry.
Through athletics, yes. That's the athletics revenue that came in, total revenue that came in through the athletics department. In years past, it was 68 million. When we were in the AAC, it was at around 72 million. Now we're up.
But does that help us in terms of like NIL budget? Because obviously back then there was no pay for play. Now there is. Like, I don't know how that, you said it's the top quartet in revenue, but is that the same thing that determines like how much we can spend on a specific player or players, for example? Like, I don't know how, like where it gets allocated and all that. So I guess I'm a little ignorant on that subject.
There's the max, right? There's the max that you can spend, right? The max that you can spend is 22 million. That's regulated right now. Now that's going to go up, and it's based as a 20%. I think it's 20%, up to 20% of your TV revenue is what you could spend on the rev share. So there's the rev share, and then there's the NIL. The NIL, okay, is another piece of this. And NIL is based on the amount of revenue that you generate from outside of it. Now, the big piece, and I forgot to get to this with Tom, the biggest mistake that Terry Mahajer made was closing down our NIL collective early before it was official that it was going to be shut down. Because guess what happened? It wasn't shut down, right? NIL collectives are still around. They were going to close it. They were supposed to close it. They didn't close it. They fought it, and now we're trying to play catch up. Now, as far as where that 108 million put us within the Big 12 conference, okay. Number one, as far as revenue earners, was Kansas at 173.7 million, which was down from 215 million the previous year, but that was because they did a bunch of fundraising for their stadium upgrade. Colorado made 161.7 million, which was up from 147 million. TCU made 156. Oklahoma State made 153.7. BYU made 153.4. ASU was 149.3. However, remember, us, BYU, Cincinnati, and Houston, we did not get full shares upon joining the Big 12. The PAC schools did, right? So we were, believe it or not, Iowa State. Do you remember Danny White when he was talking about Iowa State being a school that we were, Iowa State and ASU were two schools that we were trying to emulate. Iowa State made 103.9 million. That was their revenue. K-State made 103. Houston made 100.1. They don't have any fans, right? But that means we made that with half share revenue. Last year we were at 90, or the year before we were at 93 million. We should step up to middle of the pack to top of the pack. Utah was 125.2. Texas Tech made 128.8 million in revenue.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that, I mean, it's great to see that jump, like you said, when we were in school, obviously significantly less. I mean, I guess it makes sense with the change in the conference, obviously the change in, with the increase in interest. I mean, the fact that we sell out games now, not every game, but we sell out a lot more. I mean, you and I come from an era where, I mean, I saw people wearing Gators and Knowles shirts around campus all the time when I was in school. And I went to plenty of games where there had to be less than 3,000 people in the entire stadium for some of these games. So, I mean, yeah, it's great to see the revenue. And I think UCF has always done more with less. And they're a pretty innovative school and figure out ways to always get better. So that's great. I mean, that revenue jump coinciding with, full share and everything that's going on. I mean, the idea is that it's finally going to get us to compete. I mean, it's like Kevin, you were just talking about in that interview here, like certain schools are just going to be fed up or fold up shop because, like you said, there's only one team that wins a championship, and so many schools are going to be like, what's the point of spending? You're never going to be able to outspend. But I mean, I think UCF is, I think, really well positioned now. One thing about the Big 12, as much as, you know, you'll see Texas Tech spend that money, like Big 12 seems to be that conference that is just not dominated by any one team. You know, it's always kind of up in the air. The only thing I will say where this money, you know, I think it's going to have to continue to roll in, and, you know, it's good to be in the top quarter, like you said, but my big concern is, I think the one thing that UCF always had an advantage of, despite being, you know, a quote unquote mid-major and all that, they had the Florida advantage, being in the state of Florida. Now I think that advantage has been basically reduced by NIL and all this stuff. Like, kids used to want to be like, I want to stay home or be in the state of Florida. Now it's like, well, you're going to throw me a bag 5 times the amount of a Florida school, I'm going to take it. So I think continuing to, you know, making sure that we have to be able to compete financially. But when you say, you know, top quarter of a conference with 16 teams, yeah, that's encouraging. So I think we are hopefully on our way to, you know, getting competitive.
Think about that from this perspective, right? So when we were in the American, right, $173 million or $140 million budget, we always talked about what could we do with that, right? What could we do with it?
Would have been insane.
Yeah, right. And so right now, if we had gotten a full share, right, this year, we'd be around 128, 129 million. That's above Texas Tech, right? That's above Utah. That's above West Virginia. That's above Iowa State. That's above Kansas State. So half of the original Big 12, we would be earning more revenue than them, which means our ability, and this is hats off to Terry Mohajir, to get donations, right? That means, you know, people showing up for games. That means merchandise sales. That means all of those things. We are, if anybody was questioning whether we should be in a power conference, that tells you where we are relative to what our perception of where we was when we were in the American. We are a power program. I think Texas Tech last year, because they've had an infusion of cash for this academic year and what they spent, they had one last year too. If we end up, and I believe we'll end up right around 140 million, that'll put us in the top half at the very least. And everybody's pretty well bunched up from like 6 to 10. Everyone's pretty well bunched up as far as the PAC schools and legacy Big 12 schools: Arizona State, Baylor, Arizona, Texas Tech, and Utah. That will put us above that group in the top 4th of the conference. Terry's excuses go away once that happens. UCF can no longer use that as an excuse as being disadvantaged within the conference and whether to compete. We already are. When it comes to men's tennis, top 15 in the country, got to the Sweet 16 this year. Women's tennis, top 25 team. Golf, top 25 team. Rowing. So the you know, softball, top 25 team. So again, the big thing now is how we reinvest in the things that UCF has measured itself by, which is football and basketball, right? Baseball, most of the season was in the top 25 or right around it, right? Have an opportunity this year. Again, they beat Baylor this past weekend handily, and we'll talk about that a little bit with baseball. They have an opportunity if they do well in the Big 12 tournament. They will definitely be going to a regional this year. How far they can go will be based on the pitching and how consistent our hitting is. But that team has an opportunity to be a top 25 team as well. So UCF already competes. Now we have no excuse to not compete in football and basketball. So that'll be the interesting part with all of this, especially since we have the advantage that we are not paying for our own stadium renovations, right? So when it comes to like the cows are going in debt, but their university is paying for it. For us, Orange County's paying for it, right? The tourist taxes are paying for that. So it'll be really, really, really interesting to see. I think this is where UCF starts to hit its stride. If you didn't think we belonged as a power conference from a revenue generation standpoint, this goes to show you that we absolutely do. And we are on the top 5 to 10 teams in the conference as far as revenue generation as a young program, having the disadvantages that we had before. We will and should be able to compete at this level in that conference. So,
I mean, when are you going to see it though? I mean, I know this is all fresh, but when are we going to see it really translate to recruiting? Because I think I don't. I mean, if you really look through the classes that we've had basically since entering the Big 12, and I know there's been a coaching change and all that, but like, I don't think our recruiting, at least on paper, and who we're getting, it hasn't jumped up considerably. Like, I mean, yes, I'm sure there's a difference and it's a better. But I think a lot of that was honestly Gus Malzahn and his name. So like, when do we really see it consistently hit recruiting where it's like, okay, it's not weird that we got 7 4-stars in this class. It's not a surprise. Like, we're still, I mean, you look at the 2027 class, you look at the 2026 class, it's not too dissimilar from any class in the last 15 years at UCF. Like, it's maybe a little bit better, but it's not like you notice like, whoa, there's a big difference here. And I know that takes money, but when do we see it really hit that where it's like, hey, because like right now we're ranked 15th out of 16th in 2027. I know it's early and we only have 3 commits, but when do we see it where it's like we're now in the top quartet of the Big 12 in recruiting rankings?
So I don't think under Scott Frost we will see that. And here's why. His philosophy is, well, he said it himself. I'm
fine with it. No, I'm not disagreeing necessarily.
He said, I don't think it has anything to do with money. I think it has everything to do with what the
culture fit.
No, I think yes. But I think it's his view of what happened with Gus Malzahn and what he learned last year was you're not going to be able to retain them the next year. So if you go all in on getting a high 4-star player versus picking someone who's proved it, we've had some good success with guys that we've brought up from the lower mid-tier levels. I think his philosophy is if I can get those 3 stars, they won't cost as much. We'll spend on the holes, and he said this, we'll spend on the holes that we need to fill in the transfer portal. But if I can get those 3 stars for cheaper, I can retain them and then build them into the players that I want them to be that would be worth that money later on versus betting higher dollars on, all those 4 stars to begin with, and then 3/4 of them not working out. Or on for them. So I think it's less from a recruiting standpoint. I think it's less to do with how much we pay. That's a part of it, but I think it has more to do from a recruiting strategy standpoint from high school on what he's looking to get. And the Power 4 conferences are not recruiting at the levels that they were out of high school because they're not spending them on that. They're spending it on the transfer portals. And there's been a shift as of late, the last 2 years, on trying to pick up the guys that aren't going to make the Alabama roster. And we talked about this when all this went down, that aren't going to make the Alabama roster or the Michigan roster and start, that are still high level players, and then go and pick those guys up and bring them here and try to build them back up. Right. So I think the philosophy is different. And I think the philosophy more than the budget is going to dictate that under Scott Frost. Now, Scott Frost is no longer here. More than likely, that means he wasn't successful, which is going to suck for UCF. I could see another coach going in and trying to spend that money and changing that dynamic.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, you're right, Frost. I mean, there's a whole, I've seen kind of some chatter in the message boards and, social media where I people are not happy with how Frost has kind of talked about UCF in the media, and I don't think he's doing it like personally or trying to say anything about UCF badly. Obviously, he works there, so I wouldn't think he would doing that. But he just kind of keeps alluding to like essentially how much less pressure there is at UCF compared to Nebraska, which is obviously an undeniable fact. But like the way he's coming off of it is very like, it was interesting. I was listening to another UCF podcast the other day, and I thought they made a really good point, which I agree with. UCF has kind of like, you know, Frost has only been at UCF for the 3 years. It's been all love. Like the first year he was here, he turned around an 0-12 team to a bowl team. Then the best year in school history was the year after. And then last year was like kind of like a, you know, gimme or whatever, you know, it's your first year back. He's never really experienced the UCF fan base turning on him like Gus Malzahn, like Josh Heupel, like George O'Leary at the end. Like, I don't think he realizes that. I'm not saying we're like Nebraska where we're going to like crowd him in a restaurant and take pictures of him, like, you know, in a small college town, but I don't think he's ever experienced like the rabidness of the UCF fan base. And I think he's kind of underestimating that, like, this honeymoon phase, or if he has multiple years in a row that are not winning seasons, I don't think that the fan base is going to have his back anymore. So I think his comments in the media have just been very interesting, how he keeps talking about how, like, you know, he can live a low key life in Orlando and, you know, there's not a lot of pressure. It's like, I don't think he realizes there's pressure to win. Maybe it's not Ohio State pressure or something like that, but there is pressure to win. And so it's interesting, his comments recently. I don't know if you picked up on that.
I think he's trying to under promise right now. Whereas before, yeah, well, not necessarily over deliver, but like set the tone, right? So like at UCF, the first go round, what was Scott Frost? Fire and brimstone, right? He was, you remember, the get back guy at the end, you know, for refs. One of the things we loved about him was like someone was having to hold him back when he was pissed off at the refs.
Oh, right.
You know, we're going to win, and we're going to exuded confidence and all of that. And I think that's important. This version of Scott Frost went through Nebraska. As far as pressure is concerned, we have some big time boosters, but even those big time boosters don't get as involved directly with the coach's decisions as what schools like Nebraska did, or Auburn and Yellowwood. Everybody knows about that, right? Or some of the others. I think that's more of what he's talking about and less about pressure to win. I think there's a pressure to win, but I think he's also trying to set the tone as, hey, we're rebuilding this thing. It's not going to be as fast as it was in the American. I think that's what he's trying to portray, because
just set expectations.
Yeah, I think it's more an expectations game than it is Scott Frost not being as confident or firing or underestimating
the fan base.
I mean, I remember what it was like when he left. And do you remember what it was like when he left? There was some vitriol that was out there for Scott Frost, especially when he showed up.
People were pissed, yeah, in
the championship game, and he's got the red checkered shirt on underneath the 100%. Gray suit, right? So,
but not while he's been here. That vitriol has never been while he's like actively the coach, like other UCF coach. Like, I mean, Gus Malzahn got booed really bad at Spirit Splash. Like you could see it. Like he was up. I mean, Scott Frost has never experienced the ruthlessness while being the UCF coach. I mean, he's been essentially like immortalized for that, you know, that 2017 season. We all look at that with such nostalgia. Like, and I agree, he is probably just setting expectations, and he's, you know, saying that, yeah, like you said about the boosters, it's obviously UCF boosters are not the same as Nebraska boosters, but like, I don't know if, I'm not trying to say he's ignorant to the fact, but I wonder if he doesn't realize that, like, what the UCF fan base has turned into, because there's the other part about it. In 2016, 2017, we had very before that 2017 season, we had very limited success up to that point. I mean, we had the 2013 season. We had a coach that was there for over a decade, and we didn't know any different for a long time. And at that point, we were still in the American with very little expectations. I mean, at that point in time, we were still yo-yoing good season, bad season, good season, bad season. So like, I don't know, like if he realizes in the time since he left, because he was obviously a coach at a different school and probably wasn't paying attention obviously as much. Like, I don't know if he realizes the fan base is a lot different now. Like, I think back then, like you forgave, 6-6 seasons, 5-7 seasons a lot more, or at least kind of expected them to happen. Now the fan base, and partly due to Scott Frost, has some of the fan base, I'll say, has somewhat of an unrealistic expectation to like be elite a lot. So I just don't know if he realizes the fan base can get pretty rabid and nasty, because he's never experienced it. And when he was here, that wasn't the case, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't think he will. If he is underestimating it, he won't experience it for a while, because the expectations are still a rebuild. I mean, we've kind of been tamped down. Though, honestly, Gus and probably Heupel got the worst of that, right? Because Heupel had to come in after Scott Frost, and that first season, 2018 season, we went undefeated during the regular season again. Lost against LSU in the bowl game, but then that following season wasn't as great. He got a lot of recruiting. Grief, but it's funny because Malachi Lawrence was a Heupel recruit. It's crazy to think about, right? But he was a Heupel recruit. So,
Heupel actually had some guys go pro for us. He wasn't as bad recruiting wise as we thought. I mean, I think that last recruiting class, he was a little bit checked out, and that one wasn't great. But like, you look back at some of his guys, like they went pro, like a Brandon Johnson, a Malachi Lawrence. I mean, there's definitely guys that, and I think he was a Paul Rubelt recruit as well. I mean, I know he's signed right now to he got a camp deal, things like that. But it's funny that you mentioned that season after. That's what I think Frost doesn't realize. If you recall, and granted, we were coming off of 2 back-to-back undefeated regular seasons, but that follow-up year to 2018, UCF won 10 games. Like, it wasn't like it was a bad year. It was just bad in comparison. Like, we started out that season 3-0 and absolutely destroyed Stanford at home. And then, we went on to go 10-3 on the season, and people were like, almost calling for Heupel's head on a 10-3 season. Like, I don't think Frost realized. Now, granted, if we had a 10-win season now or next season, we'd be, jumping for joy. But it's funny because you mentioned it was like, oh, we kind of fell off. We were essentially still a semi-elite team at 10 wins. And people, I remember how much hatred there was going Heupel's way. Like, he lost to Tulsa that year and people were freaking out. So just funny because the fan base has significantly changed since Frost was first here.
Yeah, but I think they've also calmed down again. I think the whole Gus Malzahn.
Oh, now they have, for sure.
Has calmed everybody down off of that high. So I think he's catching it at the right time, to be honest with you, when it comes to that. Because we were on this high and then it was like, oh, we're mortal again. And now it's like, okay, it's the rebuild, right? So I think Scott's going to get his fair share. It'll be interesting to see what happens this season, right?
For sure.
Hopefully we don't have as many problems with the injury, but I think he's just getting ahead of the narrative because he knows that there were such high expectations given the past and the highs that we had the last time he was here. And I think he's very, very aware of that. So interesting talking point though. I think I'll save this for next time. One of the new things that came out this week was mixed use facilities and whether UCF can be a part of that. But I think we need to, given where we are, we've got like 16 minutes left. I want to talk about baseball real quick. Baseball has no midweek game this week. because they have a Thursday series starting with Kansas State in preparation for the Big 12 tournament. This team did what it was supposed to do against a Baylor team that did not do as well, as what was expected preseason even. So UCF did what it needed to do against Baylor, won the series, won the first 2 games handily, right? So that's interesting. And as far as what that does for the conference race, UCF had the opportunity to go into 3rd place. We're now sitting in 4th place. We're tied with Arizona State, but Arizona State holds the tiebreaker. We should still get the double bye in the Big 12 no matter what, as long as we take care of business against Kansas State, which we should. Kansas State is not great this year. The Bats seem to have found some rhythm. They won 8-0 in the first game in a run, and then won 19-3 against Baylor in a run rule game in 7. And ended up losing 7-8 against Baylor on the Sunday game. And that just, what that highlighted to me was that due to the injuries, our pitching depth really, really is questionable. So for that Sunday game, right? That 3rd game. And so going into the regional, it'll be interesting because we really need to stay in the winner's bracket for us to have the pitching depth that we need to have a shot when we go into the regional. But we will go into the regional next up. So Bethune-Cookman, the 2nd game. Remember, we played them earlier this year, beat them. Bethune-Cookman, again, a good team, expected to go to the regionals as well this year. So we play K-State starting Thursday, the 14th, at home at 6 p.m. Then Friday is senior night against K-State at 6 p.m. It's a Publix game. They have been throwing out subs at the softball game. It'll be interesting to see if they start doing that at the baseball game on Friday night. And then we play on Saturday, May 16th at 1 p.m. on Sunday at home. And then 3 days later, it's time for the first round of the baseball tournament. So we should get a double for the Big 12 starting on the 19th, and that's in Surprise, Arizona. So we should get a double bye, assuming we take care of business against K-State this weekend, which is obviously advantageous. Arizona State, I don't think that we have a chance to catch them even if we sweep Kansas State. If we would have swept Baylor, I think we could have ended up in 3rd place in the conference. Arizona State plays Houston, which is the bottom of the league. They're 6-21 in league play, so I expect them to sweep Houston. So even if we sweep K-State, then we end up in 4th place, which is still great for this team. Puts us well positioned with the double bye and gets us ready for the regional. So that's exciting. I was excited to see the hitters start to get back. Deamis Ross did well. The hitting, Andrew Williamson, if you want to call it a slump, was in a little bit of a slump. So he got back into his groove. He got his groove back. So I expect us to obviously end with a winning series, but also hopefully to sweep. The only concern again is what I saw on Sunday, which is the Baylor is not a great hitting team, and we've got some great hitting teams in the Big 12 tournament. So for us to compete and actually win that tournament, West Virginia is hitting really well. Kansas is hitting really well, as is Arizona State. Arizona State has some of the best hitting in the country. So our pitching staff, who's going to step up? Mateo Gray did okay, didn't do what he usually does or what we expected, and we pitched by committee. So we're going to have to be really, really careful going into the tournament. Along with that, we also have UCF softball. Softball was ousted last week by Kansas, number 5 Kansas. They lost 5-6. We won that series earlier on in the season. We got out to a hot start and just didn't finish. So we start our regional at the Tallahassee Regional versus Jack State. And then depending on who wins that, then we will play the winner of Florida State and Stetson, which I expect to be Florida State. So UCF as a 6 seed playing Florida State should be the championship game in the Tallahassee Regional. Now we have a shot against FSU. FSU always has a good softball team. It depends on which hitting team shows up for softball this weekend in this regional. But we do have a shot to win that regional and move on to a super regional this year. But the team has to play well, and the hitting has to be there because our pitching depth just isn't. So that's what we have there. Let's go ahead and move on and swib it to a little bit of listener love. One thing I did confirm, folks, is that if you were watching the comments on the show, I did confirm that Econ Advisor was my former professor at UCF. He is Dr. Mark Soskin. Yep. And I'm not calling him out there. He has it on his profile. But he was, and honestly, if you took econ, when did you take economics during your undergrad?
When did I take it?
Yeah.
Is that a core class?
It was.
And I was going to say, because I was a journalism major, so I didn't, I was doing all those classes, but that must have been, if that was like a core, what are those called, the golden core classes or whatever.
No, you're thinking about Gordon Rule.
Yeah, Golden Rule. It's not that.
No, it's not a Gordon Rule class. Gordon Rule was for, you had to write 20,000 words or whatever.
Is economics that like a 101, type of class, like a freshman year class, or no?
I don't know if it's freshman or not, but it is required.
Then I'm going to say freshman or sophomore year. I would say, what if you're talking about year, that would be 07 or 08.
Yeah, so Dr. Soskin was still there. He retired in 2016, so you may have had Dr. Soskin as well. So Econ Advisor, if you're watching, which you probably are, I had a great class with him, and we were able to connect in the comments on that. So that was super awesome. Econ also says, I posted a long time ago that AB's injury, quotation marks, had to be a meniscus issue, which heals up quickly and explains all his delayed rollout. He said, I had posted immediately that it definitely sounded like a meniscus, which heals rapidly with no lasting issues. Also, one thing you have to say about Gus was that his O-lines could protect his QBs. Sure, his QBs were also run first, so passers, and his running backs were too dangerous to blitz on. My comment to that was mixed results for O-lines, great on passing downs, and oddly not so good on rushing downs. But defenses play strengths, and we definitely want to run. They knew we were going to run. They tried to take that away. So the O-line, especially the last year of his O-line, they did much better against the pass rush than they did against the run. Now, early on, that wasn't the case. We had a great running attack. We had mobile quarterbacks. We had people like Bowser that could just bowl over the line. But more recently, that wasn't the case. Also, shout out to our new subs. We had several new subs last week. Unfortunately, I don't know your name because you have it set to private. However, Dennis Richardson did not. So shout out to Dennis Richardson. Welcome to the fam. We appreciate you liking, subscribing, following, and sharing with your friends, because after all, we do it for you. All right, 1:53. So we got less than 7 minutes left. Alan, do you have an oxymoronic stat of the week? We haven't had that in a while.
I don't.
Wow. Man, showed up late, doesn't even have the stat of the week.
That's what I messaged you in the private chat. You still called me out there.
I didn't see that. Sorry.
Look, I have a baby coming in 2 days. That's my excuse.
No, that's your excuse. Yes, congratulations, you announced it. So there we go. Let's go ahead then and move on. We'll talk about a quick update on other UCF sports that you don't watch.
What about a football? I guess what we can talk about next week, maybe the football, the recruits that we landed.
Yeah, we definitely want to talk. Well, are you going to be here to talk about recruits last week?
I don't know. Probably not. So
yeah. Your wife's going to kill you if you're on the show next week, dude. I'm just letting you know.
Oh, I would agree with you. So, I mean, what do we have? 5 minutes here? I guess go over the other UCF sports.
We have 5 minutes left, literally. All right, let's talk a little about UCF women's golf as they are getting ready to kick off on, or they have kicked off their regional appearance in Ann Arbor, Michigan, at the University of Michigan Golf Course. Yesterday, they finished 5th at 287. Today they finished 6th with 581 strokes. So their final starts tomorrow at 8 a.m. EDT at the University of Michigan. Also, our rowing team, they will be starting May 29th and 31st at Lake Lanier, Georgia for the NCAA championships. Our tennis team unfortunately bowed out in the Sweet 16 and was defeated. But great season, great team, something to be proud of. And this team tends to hover around the top 15, etc. Women's tennis got out a little bit early, but really hats off to the UCF men's tennis team, highest ranking ever, got to the Sweet 16, and expect more out of that program to come. All right, Alan, I'm going to shut up. If you want to give a quick update on UCF commitments, I will do that. We've got exactly 3.5 minutes left.
Yeah. Well, I guess when was the last? I haven't been on the last couple of shows. What was the last ones you've talked about? I don't know where the last, like, have you talked about any of the 2020?
We've talked about the 3 2027 commits.
Oh, you talked about the 3 2027 commits, you said?
Yeah, I talked about them.
Oh, so then what is there to talk about then?
I don't know. I thought maybe you had some super secret squirrel stuff that I didn't
know.
No,
I don't. No, I didn't know if you I didn't know if you had talked about them or not. But yeah, if they've already been talked about, then I guess we'll wait till the next recruit comes in.
All right, so then I'm going to put you on the night driving. Notice I did the night driving. Or they don't spell it that way, but I'm going to call it that. So it's always me. Thank you to Tom for joining us. That was an interesting look into everything NIL. It's ever evolving, and his view of some of this evolving is that there will be more structure coming all in recruiting for. So let's hope for that. Thank you, Alan, for joining me. Good luck, fingers crossed, for the baby. So
thank you.
Celebrating early for you, so I'll be thinking about you this week. And of course, your wife. And other than that, thank you everyone for liking, subscribing, commenting, following along. Go Knights and
charge on.
Charge on, baby. All right, now this is where you say stupid stuff that Josh.
I'm taking over Josh's role.
Yeah, you got to talk about something more.
Go Knights, go Knights, go Knights.
That's terrible.